Every time he looked out of his window, someone was already there, standing still across the street, watching the house as if they had been waiting for him long before he even thought to look. And if you're someone who notices patterns that don't quite make sense, you might want to stay with this story, because what began as a small, almost forgettable detail slowly became something that could not be explained. And by the time he realized what was really happening, it was already too late to pretend it was nothing. The house stood on a quiet road just outside Manchester, England, in the late autumn of 1904. A narrow, two-story building with tall windows that faced directly onto the street. The kind of place where evenings passed slowly, and nothing ever seemed out of place, until one man began to notice that something always was. Thomas Ellery had moved into the house in early May of that year, a man in his early 40s, quiet by nature and careful in his habits, someone who preferred routine over surprise and silence over unnecessary conversation. He worked as a bookkeeper in a small office in town, leaving his house each morning at precisely 8:15 and returning just before dusk. His days measured and predictable in a way that gave him a sense of control over things that most people never even thought about. The house suited him. It was simple, orderly, and removed enough from the center of town to offer the kind of stillness he had grown accustomed to over the years. Nothing about it suggested that anything unusual would ever happen there, and for months nothing did. Until the first time he noticed the figure. It was a Thursday evening in October, cold enough that the windows had begun to gather a faint layer of condensation, the street outside dimly lit by a single gas lamp that cast long shadows across the pavement. Thomas had been sitting in the front room, a book open in his hands, the quiet ticking of the clock behind him marking time in slow, steady intervals. He was not expecting anything, not thinking of anything beyond the page in front of him, when he looked up, briefly, casually, and saw someone standing across the street. The figure was still, completely still, facing the house. At first, there was nothing particularly strange about it. People paused in the street all the time. People waited, thought, hesitated before moving on. But something about the stillness lingered longer than it should have. The figure did not shift, did not glance away, did not show any sign of intention. Thomas watched for a few seconds, then returned to his book. But when he looked again, the figure had not moved, not even slightly. That was the moment something changed. Not in the street, not in the house, but in him. Because stillness, when it lasts too long, stops feeling normal. The next evening, it happened again. This time, Thomas noticed it sooner, almost as though part of him had been waiting without realizing it. He sat in the same chair, the same book in his hands, and without thinking, his eyes moved toward the window. And there, already there, was someone. Not walking into place, not arriving, just standing, as though they had been there all along. This time, the figure appeared different. The shape was similar, but something about the posture felt unfamiliar, and yet the stillness remained the same. That exact same stillness. Thomas closed his book, slowly, carefully, and watched. Minutes passed. The figure did not move. A cart rolled by. A man walked past on the opposite side of the road. Neither of them reacted. It was as though the figure did not belong to the same world as everything else around it. That night, Thomas did not sleep well. Not because he was afraid, but because his mind refused to settle on a simple explanation. By the third night, the pattern had become undeniable, and with it, something else had begun to grow. Awareness. He started paying attention to the timing. Not the exact minute, but the moment he looked. Because that was when it happened, not before, not after. The moment he chose to look outside, Someone was already there. It didn't matter if he waited longer. It didn't matter if he avoided the window entirely. The result was always the same. He would look, and someone would be watching. At first, he mentioned it casually to a neighbor, Mrs. Langford, who lived a few doors down and had a reputation for noticing everything that happened on the street. "Have you seen anyone standing outside in the evenings?" he asked, keeping his tone light, as though the question itself held no weight. She frowned slightly, considering it. "Not that I recall," she replied. "Why?" Thomas hesitated. "Just thought I noticed someone," he said. She nodded, unconcerned. "Probably waiting for someone," she suggested. But Thomas knew that wasn't true, because waiting involves movement, and these figures never moved. Weeks passed, the sightings continued, and slowly the unease began to deepen. It was no longer just about what he saw, it was about what others didn't. On several occasions he tried to show someone. He called them to the window, pointed toward the exact spot, described what he was seeing in careful detail, and every time the answer was the same. There's no one there. At first he questioned them, then he questioned himself. Then he began to question something far worse. One evening, determined to break the pattern, he changed everything. He avoided the front room completely. He remained in the back of the house, where no window faced the street, where no reflection could betray him, where he could not accidentally see what he did not want to see. He stayed there for hours, long past the time when the figure would normally appear. And then, without warning, he stood up, walked quickly to the front room, and looked outside, and there, exactly where it always was someone. Already there, not arriving, not appearing, just waiting. That was the moment the thought settled fully in his mind. They were not coming when he looked. They were there before. Always there. And he had only just begun to see them. After that, everything changed. The house no longer felt the same. The silence no longer felt neutral. Even the reflection in the window began to feel uncertain. Because once you begin to question what you see, you begin to question where it exists. Outside or inside. The final night came quietly, colder than usual, still. The kind of stillness that makes every sound feel louder than it should. Thomas sat in the front room again, not reading this time, not pretending that anything was normal, his eyes fixed on the window, waiting. Not for the figure, but for the moment it would reveal itself. Minutes passed, nothing. No one outside, no movement, no shadow. For the first time in weeks, the street was empty. And yet, something felt wrong, because the absence felt heavier than the presence ever had. Slowly, almost without thinking, Thomas leaned slightly closer to the glass. And that's when he saw it. Not outside, not across the street, but behind him, reflected in the window. A figure, standing in the room, still, silent, facing the glass, exactly where the others had always been. And in that moment the truth was no longer something he could question, because whatever he had been seeing outside had never been outside at all. And now I want to ask you something. If one day you realize that what you feared was never out there, never distant, never separate from you, but had been standing closer than you ever imagined, would you turn around and face it? Or would you stay exactly where you are, pretending you never saw it? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if stories like this stay with you longer than they should, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay for the next story.